So finally, you can see this month illustration. Thanks to Alison Carrick Williams, and this topic was proposed for the from the Kansas chapter. And I'm very happy to introduce our speakers from this session, Tiffany Hart and Tanya Garma, two amazing women who will share a lot of knowledge and experience and stories with us today. So please, I welcome the two of them today. In the meanwhile, I'm gonna stop sharing my screen and I'm gonna give them the spotlight.
Thank you so much, and welcome everyone to our session, How Finding Home is the Key to Unlocking Purpose, Creativity and Joy at Work. So I will briefly introduce myself and my co-partner in crime, Tiffany Hart. My name is Tanya Garma. I am a digital experience strategist. I'm also a content strategy director, and I've worked at creative and innovation agencies across the UK, Australia, and Europe for the last, I think, 16 plus years. And Tiffany Hart, who is my partner in crime, she is a tech startup founder and a digital transformation specialist. She also has a bit of a side gig with Startup School. And collectively, we've worked with some amazing brands and organizations such as Microsoft, Google, Daimler, Mercedes-Benz, Nivea, Maybelline, Miele, and many more. Now, we'd love to start off with a question. Has there been a place you've visited, you've lived, or you've worked where you've just immediately felt at home? Just take a moment and try and immerse yourself in that place. How do you physically feel when you feel at home? Are you calm? Are you at ease? Are you completely yourself? Now, what about a place where you felt like you don't belong, where you know in your bones something just doesn't feel right? What do you physically feel when you feel out of place? Are you on edge? Are you stressed out? Maybe you're even burnt out in some cases. Well, from our perspective as two Australian born and raised women that are living literally on the other side of the world, thousands of kilometres away from our original home, we can tell you that home is actually not a geographical location at all. It's not about speaking the same language. It's not about sharing the same customs. It's definitely not about experiencing the same weather and climate. We can definitely tell you that. Home is essentially about belonging. And belonging is really fundamental to being human. Some psychologists even believe that the need to belong ranks just as highly as our need for love. So today we are going to explore just how powerful finding home and finding your place is to your sense of belonging, and how your own home can impact your creativity, your purpose in what you do and in your career. So today, in this Creative Mornings session, we are going to unpack and discover the most universal aspects of feeling at home, how home is a driver of your core purpose as a human, why instilling a sense of home to your work increases creativity and innovation, how to know if you feel at home in your job, and most importantly, how to create a sense of home to your place of work, no matter what stage of your career that you're in. So let's get started. What is home? At the beginning of the session, I briefly talked about those physical sensations that your body experiences when you encounter that at-home feeling. And now we want to outline some of the universal emotional responses that arise when we are within surroundings where we feel at home. You feel accepted. You feel safe. You feel appreciated. You feel supported. You feel contented. You feel respected. You feel trusted. And you feel purposeful. And in essence, when you feel at home, you feel you can be wholeheartedly, unconditionally 100% yourself. You can just be you, knowing that you're safe, you're supported, and you're accepted. It's a wonderful, wonderful feeling. And feeling at home also allows you to really get to know yourself too. So you feel you can be yourself, but you also really get to understand who you are. When you drop any facades or pretenses, you can find out exactly just what you are all about as you as an individual. This sense of home almost gives you a bit of a safety net or a foundation. It gives you that breathing space to discover what are your inherent talents, what are your strengths as an individual, what are your core values, what do you believe in, and what is your purpose, what drives you and what motivates you. So when you feel at home, it does give you that safety net to allow yourself to ask some of these questions to get to know yourself. So, what were the life events that made you you, for example? What are you interested in? What are your interests? What types of work activities do you normally gravitate towards? What brings you that flow? What brings you that joy? And what do you personally stand for? What is your purpose? Essentially, a sense of home equals the freedom to live authentically, to live a life that is completely natural and authentic and genuine to you. Now, just imagine that you felt all of these things at work. I want you to raise your hand with the little hand icon if you feel like this in your career, if you want to. I can tell you that I can personally recount a previous workplace of mine in my 20s where I felt pretty much the exact opposite of these things. I realized very quickly, probably day one on the job, that something just didn't feel right. My role seemed kind of token. It seemed like it was maybe created for political reasons or superficial reasons, vanity reasons. And I felt I was constantly playing this part. I felt like I was constantly playing catch-ups, and I was desperately trying to justify my existence within the team and within the organization. So, to cut a long story short, it disappointedly culminated in me being forced to choose to stay in a job where it was quite toxic and where I just felt like I really did not belong, or to resign without a new position in place. And I can tell you now, I ended up choosing the latter. I decided to leave without a job to go to. And I can say, hand on heart, it was the best decision I ever made. It led me on a completely new trajectory in my career. And I actually took some time off. I did have the luxury. I was in my 20s. I had a bit more freedom than I do now, but I took some time off to really understand what I wanted, what I was and wasn't going to put up with in my next job, what my boundaries were in my career, but most importantly, to really go for what I really wanted, what makes my heart sing, essentially. So after some time, I actually landed almost like a dream role that ticked so many of those things. So my work and contribution were highly appreciated. Finally, I felt like I was part of a supportive tribe, like so many amazing co-workers that I loved going into work every day to grab a coffee with, to chat to. It was such a nice supportive circle. I ended up being promoted twice in 18 months, which was amazing. I really felt like I was getting rewarded for my contribution. And I felt a really true sense of mental stimulation. I was doing really interesting work, really, really mentally challenging work, things that I had never before experienced in my career. In a nutshell, I honestly felt like I'd arrived home. And Tiffany and I are really here to tell you today that you can absolutely instill a sense of home to your professional life. And when we talk about this, we're not talking about feel-good vibes. It isn't about foosball tables, pinball machines, or in-house baristas, although an in-house barista is actually pretty awesome. We are really talking about the real stuff, that sense of belonging. We truly believe that when you feel at home at work, you're more productive, you're more creative, and you're more innovative. And it is not just Tiffany and I's humble opinion. It is really a theory and a hypothesis that is backed by a ton of research. You know, this is really a theory that is backed by science, and we wholeheartedly believe this. So just to name a few research that we've uncovered from McKinsey and Company, when employees feel comfortable asking for help, sharing suggestions informally, or challenging the status quo without fear of negative social consequences, organizations are more likely to innovate quickly, unlock the benefits of diversity, and adapt well to change, which we all know is super important for organizations today. And from the Harvard Business Review, positive emotions like trust, curiosity, confidence, and inspiration broaden the mind and help us build psychological, social, and physical resources. We become more open-minded, more resilient, motivated, and persistent when we feel safe. Humor increases, having fun at work is super important, as does solution finding and divergent thinking, the cognitive process underlying creativity. And finally, one more from the New York Times Magazine. The behaviors that create psychological safety are part of the same unwritten rules we often turn to as individuals when we need to establish a bond. And those human bonds matter as much at work as anywhere else. In fact, they sometimes matter more.
So let's explore some questions to ask yourself and your co-workers to ascertain if you feel at home in your workplace or your place of work right now. And the more you agree to these statements means the more at home you are in your current work or in your current job. So the first question is, do you feel accepted? You feel welcomed and included by your team. There is an openness from both you and your colleagues towards one another. Can you be yourself without playing a specific role or pretending? You know, of course, the famous saying is fake it till you make it, but amongst your colleagues, it doesn't have to be the case. Do you feel listened to and heard? And, you know, there's always a right time and a right place to share, but when the occasion arises, are your thoughts and opinions heard? Do you feel safe? Feeling safe is a core part of psychological safety, as Tanya mentioned. And have you ever been singled out, excluded, made fun of, picked on, bullied for your gender, race, appearance, religion, culture, or for just being you? Have you ever been excluded from meetings which are directly part of your job and the meetings that you need to attend in order to do your job well? Do you generally feel comfortable about what you're doing or what your colleagues say? Have you ever been in the firing line from one of your workmates makes sleazy comments, or have you ever been shunned or blatantly put down? Do you feel appreciated? Do you earn as much as your colleague in the same job or function, especially if you're performing at the same equal standard? Have you been promoted on the basis of providing fact-based evidence on your achievements, contributions, and exceeding your targets? Have you been accredited and acknowledged for your contributions, ideas, and your good work? Do you feel supported? Are you satisfied by your work/life balance? Are your non-work commitments respected by your peers? Does your work cover you when you can't be there due to sickness or holidays or just private matters? Likewise, do you jump at the chance to support your colleagues when they can't be present? Is there a mutual respect amongst your colleagues? Do you and your colleagues operate as a unit? Do you stick up for each other? Are you lifting each other's up? Are you building on each other's strengths? That's really about how you feel supported. Do you feel respected? Are you not afraid to have a voice, share your opinions or new ideas? Do you feel that your suggestions and contributions are really being taken seriously by your peers and also by your leader or management? Are you regularly shut down or dismissed by your team members? Do you feel contented? Do you enjoy going to work each day? Do you get up in the morning and feel happy to get yourself ready for work? Are you proud of where you work and what you do? Are you proud of your workplace and who you work with? You know, approximately we spend 80,000 hours in our career doing what we do. So finding a place where you gel and where you find a place that you think rocks is really important for long-term happiness. And does it give you an inner sense of happiness knowing that you are contented at work? Because this is also another feeling. Do you feel trusted? You're not afraid to fail or make mistakes. Your company embraces failure and encourages you to go for it and try again. Are you afraid to provide constructive criticism or suggestions to your colleagues and managers? Does your company have a positive feedback culture, or is it taboo and not one to touch? Do some managers and leaders don't want any back talk, and some really embrace that feedback and really take that feedback on from any level? Is there mutual trust between you and your managers or leaders? Can you trust them with sensitive and private information? And most importantly, once you do share private information, does your manager or leader remain supportive and open, or have they changed their behavior or tone towards you? Do you feel purposeful? Are you mentally and creatively stimulated? And do you generally love what you do? Of course, there are always going to be tasks you don't like, such as life, but do you generally like the nature of your work and the tasks associated with it? Can you get in the flow and get lost in a task? Flow is such an awesome quality to strive for, because normally, of course, it can come with creativity or deep thinking, but it can be felt across many other things. Does your work align with your values? Do you have many opportunities to collaborate with others and really create better work than what you could conceive yourself? Sometimes two heads are better than one, and in our case, we feel that. Tanya and I work together collaboratively on pretty much everything we do. And does your workplace, boss, or team allow that collaboration to happen? Would you recommend your boss, your leaders, or your team that you work with? And out of a scale of 1 to 10, would you give your current work a 10 out of 10? Or which is like a hell yeah, I love what I do and who I do it with? Or would you give a lower rating? And after answering all these 24 questions, you may be wondering, okay, come on, Tiffany and Tanya, does this even exist? This is like a unicorn. You may be thinking, this isn't real, and work, must be hard, or it must be hard to be worthwhile. It's all about the hustle, isn't it? Well, Creative Mornings, we're here to share with you that truly you can reach a high level of satisfaction across the board, but it takes strategy, it takes diligence, and it takes teamwork. We're now moving on to the practical part of this presentation, because without practical elements, you will kind of go away with some nice theory, but we want you to have tangible takeaways from today's presentation. So in order to create a change, we need to think holistically, and that we are one part of a totality. We are one part of making a change. Changing a culture has to come from all sides and all levels. It's a top-down, bottom-up approach that's needed to see real change being made. And it has to happen on every level, as I mentioned, on a team level, amongst your colleagues and your peers, on a leadership level, whether or not you are working at that leadership level, leveraging leadership can really make or break the success of implementing a change program at work. And obviously, organizationally, culture generally stems from the top. As in German, we say the fish stinks from the head. And I'm sure you know the translation of that. And for a program or initiative to be successful, it really requires this change to permeate the entire organization. So let's break that down. Here are some practical tips on how to do this from an organizational level. So how about put a spotlight on role models to diversify leadership? There are studies that prove that having a diverse leadership team will make a company more innovative, more creative, and more successful. And diverse doesn't mean just gender. It means race, age, sexual orientation, language, religion, amongst other factors. Making home and belonging a core part or your company value. Belonging to a tribe, a group, a club, a company, a community, a family is innately human. And fostering this culture of belonging can be so impactful in retaining and attracting top talent. Invest in leadership education. Soft skills, aka leadership skills, are in high demand in several companies that we've come across. Investing in the development of your team so people can strengthen their communication and people skills is paramount to a healthy culture. And what about make a sense of home an integral part of your organizational story? It's not always inwardly, but it can also be outwardly to the public. So weave it into your brand story, how you or your company presents itself to the outside world, being and leading a cultural example to other companies to look up to. It's one thing to follow and tag behind, but it's also another thing to set the pace and lead. So why don't you create flexible working options for your staff? Remote work or home offices were totally new ideas 2 years ago. But now, back then, some of the most innovative and cutting edge companies were the ones utilizing these kind of flexible working environments. But why not go a step further? Why not create flexible working environments for your staff that have families, or for staffers that want to learn or educate themselves, for example? Then let's move on to the leadership level. So, you could be on the front line and in the trenches with your team, or you could have more distance to the daily grind. But taking responsibility to build diverse teams will set the tone for your entire organization. Be the change you want to see. If you have flexibility to hire who you want, go for it. My son is 3, and I'm constantly trying to model this inclusive, empathetic behavior to him. So let's take these very important early stage learnings to our teams and start modeling this kind of behavior. Because I promise you, if you start with others, if you start yourself, others will be inspired and they will follow. Speak human to human, face to face, eye to eye. Communication needs to be done properly, making sure the receiver is willing to take on your feedback and have that conversation is paramount. You can't have a one-way conversation, it has to be two-way. Conflict can be uncomfortable. And though, conflict can create these uncomfortable moments, most often those are the moments where we grow. It's that kind of stress point. So approach conflict as a chance to problem solve together. The blame game can stop today. Replace blame with curiosity or openness or understanding. When we approach it from a glass half full perspective than a glass half empty perspective, it feels better, doesn't it? It feels much nicer to go in that way. And one thing that really helps is to make sure that when you are communicating, that person doesn't feel like they're under fire. They're not kind of constantly in the fire zone. So establish a feedback culture on all levels, making it a part of your team's ethos. Especially as a woman, I often forget to celebrate, even just the small stuff. So praise and reward for good work. Try to make rewards enticing enough for your team to stretch beyond what they believe is possible and what they think is possible. And a great leader is about cultivating a culture of transparency. That is super important. Transparent communication, transparent decision-making. And as a team member, because you're a team member on any level, be respectful and supportive of each other. And as I've mentioned a couple of times, be open to giving and receiving feedback. Building a culture of camaraderie, have your work colleagues' backs and vice versa. Normally like equals like. And so be supportive and collaborative with your team to problem solve together. And most importantly, stand up for what is right for you. And I'm not sure if you heard about this, but it's something that I was really inspired by with this Simone Biles story, the famous 5-time Olympic gold medalist in this last week, in the current Tokyo Games. At the 11th hour, she pulled out, and for many reasons, but actually for her team to have the success or potentially have the win. So, learning when to step out, step up, or step into the situation will make you a better teammate, a better person, and generally make it a much, much better experience and will help you to instill that sense of home. So as a final thought, we get how easy this may sound. And most of us have been in challenging situations at work before where it's been tough to keep your head above water and not create waves, because sometimes it's easier just to shout than actually to find ways to instigate change. But we urge you today to think about, it's not about making waves, but it's about making ripples. It takes smaller incremental steps to create that change. And things like finding your tribe of like-minded people at work, or working collaboratively and collectively to support each other. It's about standing up for yourselves, and if something doesn't feel right, saying something. And it's about opening up a dialogue when it's being attempted to be shut down. And I'm not sure if you've had the same experience, but the more that we open up and have those conversations, the more change will happen. Those ripple effects will go into place. And it's about making tough choices. So, sometimes it might be super hard at first, but it might be the best decision that you could have made. So it's more about making ripples than making waves. So what do you think? Let's open up this discussion. Is it important to cultivate a sense of home at work to be happy, productive, and creative? What do you think?
Yay. Let's open the mic for questions. Does everyone wants to share something with our speakers? Have any questions or comments? I saw that. I'm looking for the questions. A moment, please. Let me
Maybe
check.
I could break the ice and go first with one question. First, thank you so much for those thoughts, really inspiring. I was wondering, would you say that those tips also apply to self-employed people? So those who don't have a team, those who don't have a boss, when you're your own boss and, when you can't necessarily create like a culture with other people and so on, how would you go about that? What would be your suggestions there?
I think even if you're a solopreneur and you are your own boss and maybe you don't have any employees yet, I think we still have so much human contact. So you could be creating this sense of home and this type of culture with your customers, with your clients, creating those long-term relationships, even with your suppliers. So if you're using suppliers occasionally to help you do your job, it goes a long, long way when you have that really good sense of camaraderie, like Tiffany was talking about, having that sense of teamwork, that will also have a great halo effect on your reputation within your industry as well. So I think we still have so much contact either with suppliers or customers or clients, even if you're a solopreneur.
Yeah, and I would also say that I think it takes you to set the tone. So how you want to be interacted with is actually what you should give out, because normally as like attracts likes, or you find new partners that you can really or customers that you are aligned with. One of our ladies that works with us in our program, she went through a process of actually really checking out the alignment of her and her clients, and if their values really fit and if they fit really well together, then they could actually strengthen their relationship and they could move forward. But you've probably had people that you've just said yes to because you need the money, but sometimes also it's like you set the tone and you're in the driving seat. So if you really want to make that change within your small business, with your customers, how you show out on the outer front, it's a daily process. It's a daily practice of being decisive, making those decisions, being strategic, and really cultivating that, because it's worth it, in the long run.
Thanks so much.
Great.
Yeah, just adding on to that, I mean, when I think about, it's everything great what you said, and I love it, and it's so important to follow these kind of rules. But what I have seen, or what I've experienced in companies, that it's often said. Yes, they say you want to work as a team and be collaborative and be empathetic, etc. But it's not necessarily taught. It's not necessarily something where they take the employee by the hand and say, "I'm going to give you some training. We want to make sure that you have the right skill set." I don't know, have you experienced it here? You've also worked in different markets, and I'm sure there are many in the audience who have worked in abroad. So. Yeah, just your thoughts on that. Have you experienced any trainings on that? Yeah.
I haven't experienced so much trainings, but the example that I talked about in the presentation, when I moved to like a great organization that ticked so many of the boxes, it was really just a practical part of work. Like it was very, yes, they had an environment that was set up for collaboration. So for example, there were many breakout rooms and war rooms and places where you could grab two people and have a quick brainstorm. So they had the right setup from a physical environment perspective, but I think it was just part of the work practice. I think they genuinely believe that innovation and creativity only comes through collaboration. But I think one thing that was very unique about that organization was, again, like Tiffany mentioned, the what do they say, that the fish rots from the head. But in this case, the head, the top, had the right values in place. The core values of that organization was so strong that they literally talked about them in your onboarding on the website. It wasn't just a case of like, let's quickly write some values. They really lived them. And I think I've totally been in the same situation as you, Tatiana, where you've been sold the dream in a job interview, and then you come and then the reality is vastly different. And there comes a point, I think, you've got to give things a try, and you've got to maybe implement some of those suggestions that Tiffany talked through. But of course, if there is a point where systemically things don't look like they're going to change, there is no willingness or openness for change, then sometimes you do have to make a tough decision. You know, Tiffany and I are not HR experts, but we're only speaking from our experiences. And sometimes we've also had to make that tough decision, unfortunately. Or you create something on your own and you create that sense of home as a freelancer, as a solopreneur, as a side hustler or a business owner.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't necessarily say that every company is like intentionally not, focusing on these. Sometimes, they're just not focusing too much, like they're not doing enough effort. And I feel like we have a big step yet to do, and companies need to learn about it. Also, when it comes to diversity and everything, we're so much driven by unconscious biases. And there is one phrase which says, if you don't include actively, you're not including someone. So, so these are just my thoughts. Thank you very much for sharing yours.
Yeah, thank you, Tatiana.
Great. Thank you, Tatiana. Anne Peterson wrote already 2 comments. Anne, do you want to unmute yourself and talk directly? Maybe no? Okay. She said, first, I think Anne asked if will we be able to get these questions, all the questions that you mentioned in the presentation? Yeah. And then she also mentioned that I think one of the problems that many people struggle with is not having enough time because the pressure they have to deliver against some challenging KPIs and struggle to push back. Also, Lisa is saying this is so important also with clients that let people go, and I feel we just do not make a good team. And that does not have to be sad. It is important that you can work together. Lisa, I don't know if you want to add something else.
I just think that what Tanya and Tiffany said, that it's sometimes really important, like I think there is this quote by Oprah which says you have to know when to leave, and I think that is very important for your job and also with your clients. And I had this experience also transferring from New York to Germany and doing basically the same job in a different team, and I was just like, no, that's just not working for me anymore. Because the team was totally different, and it was nothing wrong with the team or me, it just wasn't a fit. And I was really thinking very long whether I should go, and in hindsight, it was definitely the right decision. And I think it's so important to find the right community for you. And in my experience, when you apply somewhere, to add what Tatiana said, is really not only what they write, but more when you're in the interview, which vibes the boss gives off. Because from my experience, I often feel when you know this person, it's very important to the leadership, then it's a good sign that it's incorporated instead of just written down.
Yeah, exactly. And also what kind of methods or what kind of tools they bring to an interview. In 2007, I worked for a company in London, and I had to do a full DISC personality assessment to see if personality-wise I would fit in with that team. And of course, there are many other great tools to play with now, StrengthsFinder and other things like this. But I think it's also about looking at if we're going to kind of create a culture, that there should, of course, be likeness and also complementary, but really not completely foreign or not going to fit into the totality of that team for it to really accelerate. So looking at kind of what are they using interesting methods, or are they asking interesting questions, or are you asking interesting questions, and you can really establish if this is going to be a good fit work-wise. And the same thing goes for clients, you know, screening clients, asking questions to your client to really see where they're at. If you see that there's going to be a long-term commitment, because it's nice to have a client on the long term than having a short one-time client.
You can also maybe, I think sometimes when you're in a job interview situation, you can be a little bit nervous to ask too many of the hard questions, but you can ask them outright, you know, what is your commitment to diversity? Is collaboration a core part of your working process? You know, really ask them the hard questions about the day-to-day work as well. Like how much do you invest in X? How much do you invest in soft skills training? You know, I think sometimes we need to be the interviewer in these situations as well, just as much as the other way around.
Great. I think Anne is ready to ask or comment something. Anne?
Yeah, thank you. And thanks very much for an inspiring talk. I think all the practical tips were really good, and the questions were really useful. I think one of the things that I've struggled in the past, and I hear some of my clients struggling with, is the speed that we're all working at means that sometimes the collaboration gets more difficult because we don't have enough time, and the companies don't necessarily, yes, they support that, but at a certain point, it's like the job needs to get done. How do we get it done? Because we can talk a lot about it, but the job has to be done. So I was just curious to know, obviously it's your own personal decision at the end of the day if this is going to fit. But a lot of people are also struggling with being able to set boundaries and to be able to say, actually, I love the job, I love the industry, but this isn't working for me. And I suppose there's a mixture of questions there. One's how does a company and a leader be able to get the job having people engaged and be able to speak up, but at the speed that people need to do things while still feeling part of the company.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that's such a good question, Anne. Wow, because I definitely have seen that in the places that I've worked in. It takes a real level of bravery, I think, from leadership in an organization. So going back to the example of the great job that I moved to, they had a tendency to build collaboration and build this time into their quotes at the very outset, into their pitches with new clients. And I reckon that there were probably many clients that said, no, too long, too expensive, no good. And they ended up attracting clients who valued that stuff, who saw the value in when you put in collaboration, when you put in that bit of extra time to get the work done. And I mean, I'm coming from a more innovation, creative industry. Of course, this might be different for other industries, but in my experience, you may have clients or customers that say no, but then maybe they're not the ones that actually align with your values. I mean, it's a really hard balance for a business owner, because you need to have that bravery and to stick to your values and stick to what you know is going to end up with a better output at the end. Because we all know when you do rush through work, it's not the best work. It's never the best work. And maybe there's going to be more changes that happen afterwards, and more edits and more iterations that will actually end up taking the same amount of time it would have taken if you did your due diligence and took the time to collaborate at the beginning of the project. So it's quite ironic, but I think you need that bravery from leadership. That's what I've seen. What about you, Tiff?
I worked in software for a large portion of my career. So, it's an engineering focus. It's about delivering projects, and it's very practical. And of course, I've worked in the creative industries too. And from a software perspective, from what I remember and from what worked very nicely was, of course, things have to get shipped, products have to get shipped, parts, stories, parts of the technology have to get shipped on a specific day. There's always going to be a due date for something. But I think from a team level and from a leadership or organizational level, there has to be a structure that can support check-ins. So for one, what has been a quite useful model was, the daily stand-up, face to face when it was possible with people directly. You can see their faces, what's happening for you, what worked yesterday, what didn't work, and how can you move through that? Where's the impediment? So that was one thing. One thing that worked really nicely with that organization too was we had these weekly check-ins. It was not about work, but it was actually work check-in on, what are you doing? How are you feeling in this role? How's the pressure? Or, it was kind of like a more relaxed session, and management really prioritize that as much as our client meetings, as much as our meetings with the team. It was also prioritized as another very important aspect of the week, and it was never cancelled. It was always there to make sure that people didn't have a chance to kind of slip back and hide away. So
I'm sorry.
making sure my watch is always telling me I'm sorry, but I think it's also looking at it structurally and finding ways to weave in things to make sure that the team can check in, the leadership can check in with both team and management, and also setting up structures in order to see people and see their faces and check in with how they are, because of course it is a soft aspect. It's a soft area. It's not a hard numbers-based thing. Of course it can be, but it's also on a soft level. So it's learning that level to learning to read and to communicate and ask questions.
Great, thank you. There's also a question from Jessica. I don't know if she wants to unmute. Jessica Foreman? No? Okay. She wrote, how can I force a change in my boss's behavior in terms of treating people, being transparent on a collaborative?
This is a tough question.
It's a hard one.
Yeah, I think this is when the ripples of change have to happen. It's about not taking big steps. It's about tiny ways to chip in, like to chip slowly at the behavior. I think one really interesting point from the presentation was about conflict. I think Tiffany talked through it. And it was about, instead of going into debate or conflict, approaching things with curiosity. So in the spirit of curiosity, Jessica, maybe you just simply ask questions. So you ask, if he may have, or she, I'm not sure if your boss is male or female or non-binary, if they have said something that wasn't very nice, or they've said something in a tone that was not very nice, you could just simply ask, like in a quiet moment, are you okay? And then they might say, I don't know, yeah, I'm fine. And then you can explain, oh, because I felt that how you said that before was a little bit blah, 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 XXX. So I think if you approach things in that kind of spirit or of curiosity, like asking questions, finding out why, maybe they might open up. You might be really surprised. But I think another good tip is I wouldn't do it in a group situation. So for example, if you were in a team meeting and your boss may have said something not very nice in the whole team, I would actually approach your boss afterwards in a one-on-one setting, like a quiet one-on-one setting with a question approach, like, are you okay? Yeah, you can ask about what had happened, but in a very much from a spirit of curiosity, not a pointing of fingers, not a blaming thing, not then they will get very defensive very quickly. What are you?
And also probably shut the conversation down too.
Yes.
You know, because they are the leader, and you know, what are you talking about? Boom, shut down. But I think that's a very good point, and I also think instilling it in. I also asking the question if you can have, you know, a quarterly check-in. You know, you could implement something to check in with your boss and make sure, like taking the initiative to check in. It could be like a check-in session, or a not a performance review, could be coupled with it, but just making sure that you can also take the initiative to start those conversations on a 6-monthly basis, for example, whatever the space is. But you could create something that helps you to start a conversation, which may feel uncomfortable. And I know a lot of us are working in home offices these days, and those kind of face-to-face conversations are very challenging now. You might have like a minor Zoom meeting, and then it's switched off and you have no contact anymore. So setting the tone and being creative on how you can instigate that change, taking the initiative, I think is something that we can help you make those small ripples. And I think showing initiative will also be interesting for your leader, because it shows, okay, this person is committed to the development of the team and the development of the company. Yeah, sure, I'm open to it. And if there's completely no openness, then maybe it's time to look for someone new to work with, because there's no need to be in a space where you feel that there's no way to communicate, or there's no way to collaborate. There are an infinite number of bosses out there.
Mm-hmm.
Great, thank you. I think because of the time, we have to start to wrap it up. I think Tiffany and Tanya have a few comments or something that they want to say to finish their presentation, like a little gift for the attendees.
Yes, we want to tell you just very, very quickly about our baby, Grow Getters. So Tiffany and I, we work together in our day jobs. This is our side hustle, and it is a platform called Grow Getters. It's targeted to women and non-binary and people who identify as women, and it's all about future-proofing. So we talk a lot about the skills of the future. We started with a podcast at the beginning of 2020, and it's a weekly podcast where we touch on a different future skill. We talk to a bunch of experts, and it's ranked in the top 20 across a whole bunch of countries around the world in the careers category. So we're really, really proud of our podcast. So do check it out. We also have a fortnightly e-newsletter. But the big thing we have now is Grow Getters Club. And we really wanted to take all of this stuff we've talked about, creating that sense of home, creating that safe space, that supportive, encouraging, fun space, and create a community around it. We have so many lady listeners into the podcast, and we've made so many amazing connections with women all over the world. And so we've created a digital membership, and it is really a place to co-work, to collaborate, to learn. It's almost like I call it our podcast on steroids. So we have our podcast, and this is like the next level of our podcast. So it's really a place where people can truly connect and collaborate. We actually have some members watching us today, which is very exciting and lovely. And a really cool thing for everyone who's attended today, we have a very special Creative Mornings offer. If you do want to check it out and see if it's right for you, we're going to be offering 30% off the membership until August 15th. So please do check it out. Our website is growgetters.io, but you can just go to this link, growgetters.txfunnel.com/creative mornings. That's our membership platform. Sorry for the ugly URL. So please do check it out. We would love to have more amazing, brilliant people come on board. And and please do listen up to the podcast. We are on a bit of a break at the moment, but we're going to be starting up at the beginning of September again with an episode every single week.
Great. Thank you. Thank you very much, Tiffany and Tanya. I'm gonna take the spotlight away. If you can please stop sharing the presentation. Great, thank you. So thanks everyone for being here today. Thank you very much again, Tiffany and Tanya, for this amazing conversation. We wait for all the community. Our next session is gonna be on the 20th of August. It won't be on the last week of August, but it will be the week before. But please stay tuned in with our newsletter and social media because it's gonna be very interesting. It's regarding about feedback. Feedback also with our team and topic release on how to release like your opinion, the team opinion in a good way, in a constructive way. So we wait for you. And thank you very much, everyone, and have a great weekend. Okay. Thank you and bye.
Thank you so much, everybody.
Thank
Ciao.
you. Bye. Happy Friday.
Thank
Happy
you.
Friday.
Bye.
Happy Friday
Bye.
morning.